there is connective tissue between them, in that both of those protagonists are isolated in the environments that they're in.
Yeah.
One of them is bringing it unto themselves, and the other has arrived in it. There are people at the wrong place, wrong time, emotionally or geographically. And the sense of humor, for me, my sense of humor is the same in both. I think Lemon is inherently more theatrical, and Zola is somewhere between the theatrical and reality. Again, I also think both are a bit absurd, or I should say hyperbolic. They exist on a plane or an Earth that looks sort of like ours, but is just a little bit off-center.
Yeah, an exaggerated sense of self.
Yeah, they play big.
The way I saw Zola, it's not unlike a Fortune 500 company CEO. And the people around her might feel or come across as lower level employees. There's one sequence that I really appreciated in terms of a power move. And it's a sort of reverse psychology moment. It's when she's asked to step back into the SUV at the pimp's behest. So I was wondering what your perception was of this person through the tweet storm, and how researching a project, you sort of like confirmed ideas that you might have had of this figure, and the importance of sort of like saying, well, maybe I'm going to play with a fictionalized version of the event, just like...
The thing that I was most drawn to or attracted to or turned on by in the Twitter thread was the voice of the protagonist, was her voice. To me, that whole, the 144 tweets as a whole are a processing of trauma, an exorcism of trauma. I think that they are a tangible object that exists for her as a totem of having healed.
Mm-hmm.
And the film version, I mean, I felt when I read that story, I genuinely felt, and maybe there's ego in this and saying something like this, but I thought no one was going to do it better than me. And I thought that because something went off where I knew I had to do it because I had to protect her. I had to protect what she was doing. I understood it. It was very clear to me. I'd not experienced anything like that, but I've had my own versions of processing and exorcising, and would love the idea of someone protecting me were it going to be like, you know, guided somewhere else where other people would see it. And I felt I sort of needed to godmother it.
It could appear, by appearance, it looks as if she's no longer in control of her destiny, but I saw it as like a master chess move where she's thinking 5 steps ahead, and she's not subservient to somebody else, but she's really taking possession of her destiny. Coleman's character switches a switch on. He changes his voice, so there he's not in control of the character that he's playing in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And so the chess move is really Taylor's character.
No, that's pretty right on. I think that you're tapped into something that I believe is there. We discussed it slightly differently, which was Taylor's character. Zola is somebody who is really good at doing the math, and when she meets Stephanie, played by Riley is someone who is good at doing the math just a little bit faster than her, and she is not used to that and doesn't see it in that way. They seem quite simpatico, which is why they fall for each other. And it is in that moment that she realizes, well, right before she gets out of the car, right? And sitting in that car, it's like, oh my gosh, she did the math faster than I could. And I think that what happens in that silence, because once that happens, a silence sets in for her, right? Like she goes to a very quiet place. And the power move is actually to watch because she just wants to get home. Like the end goal is home, so she goes to silence, right? And becomes the watcher, which is why she's ultimately our narrator and she's our tether to safety. While everything seems to be a bit loose or wild, but silence becomes her power, actually. And it's almost like the less you say, the more in charge you could be, you know?
Yeah, definitely. You employ narration to give pause, to sow discord, to remind the viewer that there's levels of trust, distrust, there's multiple truths that coexist, and they're very much bed partners. I was trying to disseminate the Reddit fantasy sequence, and listening to Q&A, and I was thinking it really is a middle finger to perhaps the audience, but also film history in a way. What was the importance for you to embed, to give voice to that character as a possible counterbalance to everything that we've seen before in the prior to that?
When I was doing my research for the piece, one of the things that I had come across a lot in the articles that were written about it, or the video pieces that were done about Asia and this story, validity always came up. How true it was. Even in the Rolling Stone article, there is this tone of questioning her truth. And I think that there is something racialized there. I feel that were she white, it's not that no one would ask if it was true. I think that less people would be asking if it was true. And most of the people asking were white. And most of the people writing these pieces were white. And so they had these tones that felt racist or prejudiced. And when that story came out, she tweeted it in October, I forget, sometime in October. And in that same month, the woman who Riley is loosely based on also writes her version of the events on Reddit. And then the guy that Nick Braun is based on writes his version of the events on Facebook. In an earlier draft, there was his version that happened somewhere in the movie, but it was like, relax.
Too much,
make these many like Brechtian breaks. But so what I thought was curious, that the film is in its entirety is in conversation with, or a love letter to, the internet and screens, and communicating in that way, right? The power of the hand or the voice, but through a screen. And what I thought was so curious about all three of their retellings is that they were actually quite similar, except that their roles in the stories is what was different. It starts in Detroit, it ends in Florida, there's strip clubs, there's a dinner, there's, this house, there's that house, but who plays the part, the characterization changes. And so I thought it would be really cute. It felt important to me from very early on to see her version of it. It would be on like sort of speed, but I wanted to hear it in her words and point at or make the like prejudiced aspects of it just a little bit louder. I mean, some of the text there are things that she said. She said she stunk, and she said she only made $1, and she said she was dirty, and I think that that's actually that person's attempt at being funny in the way that the real Zola is actually quite funny. The lot of the humor in the piece is hers, or it's me taking from her and expanding on it, but she's super funny in the way that she retells that story, this very horrible story. And I think that the white girl in the narrative tries the same, but it just lands as being mean, and it felt important to have it in there. And I thought, it was theatrical and special, and Riley is amazing in it, and
You wanted to protect also, I guess, in one sense, their funny bone, because you got quite a quite a good one yourself. I loved your opening at the Eccles.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, 1,006 people. Like, how could somebody be so comfortable at ninja chopping into the crowd?
I was just trying to get a Netflix special out of it.
Yes.
That's what it was.
Move on to so you plaster the film with visual details that we relate to our iPhones, and there's that ping sound, and it's sort of like it comes across as a playful wink to that self-awareness, and then it ferments into something that's like I say, akin to high anxiety. And there's a sequence with a basketball on a balcony, and I was getting a sense of dread for some reason. So I get perhaps the synergy we're looking for, perhaps in the like a barrage of tweets might sound or feel like that way, but you're able to bring it in as a device, but also make it land like this high anxiety, which just further, I don't know, puts more importance on I guess the third act. I was wondering, what was your strategy there? Was it a conscious choice? Did you write that aspect into the film in terms of sound? Like, how were you thinking about sound at the writing phase?
Some of the sound is written in. The main sound that is the only, I would say, sound actually written in is that whistle. It was in the script a lot more than it ends up happening in film form, because I wanted it. I used it as an homage when the dialogue was exactly in her writing verbatim. It is a sort of like
quotation mark or something.
Yeah, it comes from the source material, basically. So it's there as like the original writer is, or this came from, and once we were playing at that layer editorially, there are all these sounds. Actually, this was my manager's idea, and it's such a great idea, and it's in the film. Like, we'd had these digital timestamps, and he had mentioned that sound that the phone actually makes when you click it, and I was like, yes, and it totally got me like really jazzed up in this way that I started to think about all these sounds that are. There's like the person who talks on their speakerphone, which makes me want to kill myself when you're walking next to them on the street. Or people who leave their phones on, and there's something Pavlovian that happens almost, right? Like with all these like dings and pings and send sounds, and that we know them. You hear that sound and you know what it means. I hear, and I know someone has sent something. Why? It shouldn't be that way, but we do. And so you have some kind of visceral reaction to it. And I wanted that to be basically the score, part of the dialogue, part of the wallpaper.
That's great. So I was in total awe of Taylor's prowess, not only her physical abilities, but her comedic timing. She was just fantastic in terms of what she was able to do, just in like a bad look, like a mean look towards Riley's character, or I just loved everything about her physical nature. I was wondering, what kind of work did you do with her in terms of getting that type of performance where when there is silence, she's saying a lot more, and the
real, I would say Asia, who is the real Zola, Taylor, who is the Zola in film form, and myself have this thing in common, which is that we're both very expressive in our faces, and I probably more than them am like, if I don't like something or someone, I'm one of those people that's not very good at that, and I this is one of the reasons I actually don't love doing panels, because a friend sent me all these. I did this panel a few days ago, and a friend sent me all these pictures, and I was like, what's happening? Why am I making those faces? Yeah. And I just am very expressive, and I think I'm in a neutral, but my neutral is not a neutral. It's incredibly judgmental or aggressive or despondent, something quite extreme. Anyways, to me, that character is, in a way, a silent film character because so much is happening around her. And she's also presenting, right? So I can't even cite the specific play that I'm thinking of, but I'm remembering, maybe it's not that. It's not Macbeth, but like sometimes in Shakespeare, you have a character who has an aside, and so the character is next to the action, right? Like if you're looking at it proscenium, you put that actor on one end and everything else is happening next to them, and what that character does for the audience is, if you're confused, you look at them and that's exactly how it's supposed to feel based on what you're doing. They become the center. And so that I was imploring that thing. Not only is she sort of a silent film character, but the idea that if you're ever lost, if the movie is ever ineligible, is that the word I mean? Not legible. If it's not legible, that she would always tell you with her face where we were at. And
the psychology of the characters represented in that is
in gesture and expression, in her eyes. And I think she actually just sent me this message yesterday because I reminded her she wasn't comfortable doing that at first. And I was checking in of like, are you happy with how it's been responded to, and do you feel good? Because I think it's tough, and in some ways she has the hardest part because Riley and Coleman get to play so big, and it's like so unhinged and so bananas, and they're naughty or bad, and there's a lot for them to play with, and Nick also has a good deal to play with, but she got the least in a way because she is watching and she's the narrator, and her part, I think, for her in the moment when we were acting wasn't as fun because you'd call cut and everyone would laugh at someone else and she was like, great. I think that feels, when you're getting like a sort of audience response, it feels a little bit bad, and so she took a lot of sort of faith and trust in me that it was going to work out in the end. But I think it was a little scary, and I'm glad it landed, because if had it not, it would have.
So I guess you must be terrible at Christmas or something like that when people give you presents. Face
it's
of disappointment.
Not, it's not good.
You'll tell them right away.
My parents, I would always get in trouble as a kid for not liking things.
Great.
Yeah.
Between Lemon and Zola, you've been working in television, and now you're about to. There's a series coming out. I think it's Miss America. What can you say about finding yourself in a different era, let's say, or like different garb, or like performance that belongs to a certain era, or actions, or how people exhibit behavior? Like how much fun was it to like put yourself in a timepiece?
Oh, it was wonderful. I mean, I'm a little bit of a relic anyways in my approach, or the things that I'm attracted to. Looking at Zola, for instance, I am thrilled that I was able to be true to my roots in theater, and that a lot plays in wides, and there isn't a good deal of coverage, and things are mostly center framed, and I'm mostly working in a proscenium, and that it's still translated for the energy of what that piece was. So with Mrs. America, that was like, oh yeah, I'm like, this is where I hang out here. This makes sense to me. It's 70s, this totally makes sense to me. I just did this show for Amazon actually that ended like a week ago that takes place in the 50s, that is a horror piece called Them. And the period is right for me because my style, I feel my style is a little bit old anyways, or not like hip. I'm not particularly super hip, and so my approach anyways lended itself to those environments quite naturally, and I like very theatrical performance anyways, so I think that yeah, I fit in quite well. In a way, it might have been more normal is not the right word, but
it's not outside of your zone.
No, it was
You're
actually
very much...
like, oh yeah, this is where I hang out.
Great. Hey, this is Eric from IONCINEMA.com. If you want to support us, subscribe below. For more reviews, interviews, film festival coverage from Sundance, Cannes, Toronto, you want to check out these guys on this side.